Hi everyone, welcome to Java Techie. In our last video, we understand how microservices can communicate with each other using Feign Client, right? So today, we are taking it one step further by diving into custom headers and exception handling in microservice communication. Because let's be honest, real world applications are not just about happy flows. You will face plenty of challenges and knowing how to handle them gracefully is very important. So in this video, we'll focus on error handling with a real-time example to help you tackle those tricky edge cases with confidence. Okay, alright. So without any further delay, let's get started. So if you can remember, we created two microservices, core service and student service, where core service is the server, all the endpoint defined in the core service we are consuming in the student service using Feign Client, right? Now if I'll walk you through about the code, we have defined these endpoints in course controller and same things we are consuming from student service using Feign Client. Now if you see, this client is Feign Client. This is what we understand in previous video. Now let's understand how can we add the headers from the server side and how we can access it from the client side. Once we understand how to pass the header, then we will also understand how we can handle the exception in client side. Okay. So what we can do, we'll focus on a single endpoint to understand this custom headers mapping and exception handling. So I will take this as an example, get course. Now our first step to understand how can we pass the custom headers. So we can follow the simple Spring REST approach. You can use the annotation request headers. Then you can define the name. I can define something like request. See here, if you see, you can pass the authorization, you can pass the barrier token, anything you can pass as part of the header. But let's keep it meaningful. For our use case, I will pass request source. Okay, then you can define the name or variable of your headers. So string, I will define source system. You can also pass the trace ID as part of the request header to track the flow while debugging. You can pass n number of headers. Okay, currently I am giving only a single headers. Now with this header, what I want to validate, since this endpoint will return the course by ID, what I want to do here, I want to play with some meaningful validation. Okay, so what I want to do, I will get the source system, and there are different source system to online learn the course, right? You can go for Udemy, you can go for Coursera, you can also go for Unacademy. Fine. Now what I want to validate, if source system is Udemy, then only return the course 1 to him. If source system is Udemy and he is trying to search the course 2, then give him the error saying that you are not allowed to check the course 2. For you only course 1 is available. Okay. Similarly, for Coursera, he can only check the course 2 because they are only subscribed to this particular course. Okay. Now if user is giving Unacademy, then he can read all the course. This is what the simple validation I want to set based on the header input. I could get the single header, say hi or hello, I can print it. But let's make it more meaningful by keeping a source system and making some condition. Fine, hope this is clear for you. Now let's see how we can validate those things. Now you might have a question, hey, what if user is not giving this header at all? How will you handle that scenario? It is up to you whether you want to restrict user to pass the header or not. So there is an option in this request header annotation. You can make it mandatory or optional. By default it is mandatory, but if you want to make it optional, you can define required false. Now if you define required false, whether user is giving this or not, it does not matter to your flow. You can simply skip it. But let's keep it for now as for our use case. Now what we'll do, let's start writing the condition for specific course. So I will simply use the switch statement, get the source system, convert it to some specific either lowercase or uppercase. Then I will start defining the different case. If case is Udemy, similarly, if case is Coursera, then just define the course 2. If case is Unacademy, give him all the access, whatever the ID he is giving. Okay, so you can simply call course service dot get course by ID, give the ID what user is giving. But if you see, this looks very ugly, right? Repeatedly we are having the same code, it's duplicate code. So what I will do, I will define a method, I will just extract this to a method. Okay, so fetch course or something like that, fetch course, then I will use in all the place. Here also I can change it to fetch course and give the ID. Makes sense, right? Now if user is not giving anything, then just give some message saying that the input what you are giving is not a valid source system. You can define some message. Why this is crying? Because what it expect? Okay, it expect string as a return type, but we are returning the object. Make it generic. This is what the simple logic we can define. Now for Udemy, we are just giving him access to fetch the course 1, but we also need to tell to the user, right? Hey, since you are giving the Udemy, only this course is available for you. That is what something you need to validate. So what I can do, I'll just add a condition again here. Okay, if ID equal to 2, course, we just need to swap the condition. If ID equal to 2, then return him the course. Otherwise, just throw the error saying that it's a bad request. See, for okay, we just change it. Okay, let it be 2 and 1. Udemy can see the course 2, Coursera can see the course 1. You can also do the change here, but anyway, it's fine. It's just hard coded condition for now, right? So this is what the condition I have. If the source system is Udemy and the input he is giving 2, then allow him to get the course. Otherwise, throw the validation error. I'll just copy the same logic for Coursera. So here you can change it to 1. Then fetch the course. Otherwise, just say change the error message. Coursera does not have access a course with ID, anything, any different message. Better make it dynamic. Hope this makes sense, right? We have added the condition and returning the course based on the header input, which is nothing our source system. This is what something I was trying to give you the valid use case, and also this part, this conditional statement should not be part of your controller. It should be part of your service, but since this is just a demo, I have added here. That's fine. Now if you observe, we have two different type of error. 400, which is nothing your bad request, internal server error, which is nothing your 500. So we have both 400 and 500. Now also if you want, you can add another validation here. If you won't find any course, throw the exception. So you can do here find fast or else throw the exception. I will throw runtime exception. You can define your custom exception. Course not found with ID this. Okay, return, change it to the course object. Do the change in all the place now. All good, right? We have 400 and 500 to test. Now let's do one thing. Let's test the core service first. Okay, Let me restart the application. Go to the Swagger. Core service is running on port 80881, I guess, right? 81. Open the Swagger. Now first try to, we can only access this particular endpoint. This is where we have added the headers, right? So first I am not giving the header. Let's see what is the error. Please correct the following validation error and try again. Required field is not provided. So that is the reason we didn't specify the required false. By default it is mandatory. If you will not pass the header, then the endpoint will not reach to your controller first of all. Okay. Now let's say the course ID equal to 1 and the input I am giving on academy. We got the response. Now if I will give 2, I will get the response. Because for on academy you can check any course, but same course 2 I want to check with the Coursera. Okay, better let me copy the name from here. Coursera is only allowed for course 1, but I am giving course 2. Let's see what is the error or what is the validation we are getting. Coursera does not have a course with ID 2. Please provide a valid ID. Okay, but if I will give Udemy here, it will work. You will get the result because that is what we have defined here, right? Udemy can access the course 2, but not Coursera. Similarly, with Coursera, if I will give different course, it won't work. If I will give 1, then it will work. Now let's see the last one. We'll provide an incorrect source system. Let's see what is the result. ABC unknown source system with the 500. Okay, and if I'll give something which is not there, let's say I will give, we are getting 500 with message course not found with ID this. Okay, all the things are working. The header based validation we can do in the server side code, but in some mistake we are getting the error. These are the validation error. Now how we can handle these things in the client code? That is what something the exception handling we understand. When two microservices communicate with each other for invalid input, if there is any exception, how we are going to deal with it. Okay, let's go to the student service. Now see the syntax of student service to get the course. This is where we do call to our server, right? This is what the Feign client. But what is the syntax to call the get course? Only single ID. And in server side we have changed to pass the header as well. So same thing you also need to configure here. Go to the course service, simply copy this. Now just pass here. Okay. Now because the get course we modified in the server side code, so for that reason while consuming it you also need to follow the same syntax, right? You also need to pass the headers, and that is what we are just doing here. So again I repeat, this Feign client is nothing your skeleton of server controller class. Okay, without any implementation it will have the same syntax what you have defined in your controller. Fine. Now wherever you are doing this get course a method call, just pass the header from there. Just pass this additional input. Go to the course. Now I will define your string source system. Here also you need to pass the string source system. Now again this is controller in student service. How you want to pass this source system? You can directly hardcode here in the source system. You can go for path variable. You can also go for request param. It is up to you how you want to design your application. But for now I will go with the request param. From the client I will pass this as part of the parameter input. Okay, so that is how you need to think and design based on your use case. So I will go with the request param. All good, right? Now if I will try directly accessing it, I will get the exception. When I am saying I will get the exception for invalid request. Okay, if I will give the incorrect source system, it will give me the 500. If I will give the course which is not existing system, it will give 500, and some of the source system also we set the 400 bad request, right? How will you handle those exception? So since we are using Spring framework, we can go for global exception handling by defining our own controller advice class, and that is the generic standard industry follow to handle the exception. Okay, so for that what I can do, I will simply create one exception handler class. Now annotate at the rate rest controller advice. Next, which type of exception you want to handle here? Currently, our course service is giving 400 and 500 specific to the Feign Client exception, right? So for that, what you can do, you can define a method who will handle the bad request, then internal server error. So I'll just define response entity, handle exception, remove this, name it handle bad request, just remove this exception, okay, because the exception specific to the Feign client. So what you can do, which type of exception? Feign exception of type bad request, handle the same thing using exception handler. Now this is for bad request, do the same for internal server error. So change it to the handle server error, and this is for internal server error. Now here just return the error message, return response entity dot bad request dot body, get the exception content in UTF format, ex dot get, there is a method content UTF it, okay. Do the same for internal server error, but change it to internal server error. Makes sense, right? Now also copy this, if there is any other exception, handle it. That is the plain exception, I mean the super class. All good, right? We handle the 400, 500 and generic exception. Now what we can do, let's run our application and we can test it. We'll see whether it is working or not. Let me restart the student service. So it started. Now go to the student service, the Swagger URL. We are going for the get course. Give the course ID 200 and giving the, okay, let's go with the happy scenario first. Okay, I'll go with 2 and Udemy. We got the result, but with 2 I'll try some different source system, or what I'll do, Udemy cannot access any other course rather than 2, right? I'll change it to 1. Are you getting the correct error message in your downstream? Upstream is sending 400 bad request with this particular message, and we are able to see the same error message, right? That is how we propagate our exception from upstream to the downstream. Okay, now let's try for Coursera. He will try for 1, he will get the error. No, Coursera will allowed for 1, right? He got the result. But if you will try for 2, there is a error. Okay, now I will give the wrong source system ABC. Are you seeing the 500? See, this matters. This HTTP status code, what you are seeing, that really matters while handling the exception. Okay, now we are getting 500 and correct error message. Now if I will give on Academy here and any ID, it will work. For 2 you are getting 200, for 1 200, give anything. But what if I will give some number which is not there, 10, execute. Are you getting 500 with the message course not found with ID 10? Okay, we are able to handle all the 400 and 500 error, right? And that is how we have defined in our course service, not course, student. In exception handling, we explicitly inform to the Spring, hey, if the exception of type feign exception of bad request handle this, of internal server handle this. You can also optimize this because in Feign Client exception, let me add couple of things. Okay, you can do that. Let's say there is service unavailable exception. Okay, you can define that. And let's say there is retrieval exception. Retrieval exception, right? You can define this. So change the method name here, service unavailable. Like this, you can define n number of exception which you want to handle in your client side. But if you observe, the feign exception has different type of internal exception, right? Instead of define each of them individually, you can design your code in better readable format and clean. So what you can do for that, I'll define a method public response entity string handle feign exception. So I'll just define at the rate exception handler of type feign exception. Now here what I'll do, I'll simply use the switch case. Based on the status, I'll just redirect the request to the corresponding handler class. So what I can do, first get the status, then you can get the message. Now what you can do, you can use the switch statement, return switch based on the status like this. If it is 400, then do this. If it is 500, do this. If it is 503, which means service unavailable, just do this. So what you can do, you can also set the status manually. But for this, I will just do http status dot service unavailable. Okay. This is how you can define for all internal exception to the feign exception. That is what we can define for 400, 500, 503. See, this is not something surprise code. It's just a optimized code rather than defining individual handler for feign internal exception. So I can simply remove these things. So it is up to you. So service unavailable will handle 503 if it is internal to the feign exception. If explicitly you want to define the service timeout or socket timeout, you can define those individual handler here. Okay, let's keep it simple. Now let me restart and we'll quickly validate whether it is working or not. So core service is started. Now go to the browser. Let's go with the invalid scenario first. We are getting the correct error message, right? Now if I'll give 1, I'll get the result. Now if I'll give 1 with Udemy, it should fail. 400 bad request. We are getting the correct error message internal to the Feign client. Now if I'll give ABC 500 ABC, I mean the error message. This looks good, right? So this is how you can design your code. So this approach works well and majority of industry follow this controller advice approach. But what if you don't want to go with the Spring REST controller advice, rather you want to use the error decoder given by Feign client itself? How will you handle the exception using error decoder, not using REST controller advice? Okay, so for that what you can do, it's very simple. Let me comment this controller advice logic. Now at first step, what I want to do, I want to create a generic exception. Let's say course service exception or student service exception. Create some meaningful class. Let's create a package. Then I have created something called course service exception class. Now just create a custom error decoder to use the error decoder interface from the Feign client. Okay, so I'll just define another package called handler. Now I have created a class called custom error decoder, implements it from error. Can you see here? This class came from Feign. Just use that. Now implement the methods. There is a method called decode. Okay, so what it does, it will get your response and will check. I mean, that logic you need to write, get the response from this argument, and if there is any error, just map it based on the 400500 or any status code. Okay, so what I will do, I'll just define method key and let it be response. Now at very fast step, what I can do, I'll set some random message. Okay, string message. I'll just define unknown error. This is optional. I mean, I'm just defining this to append this to my error message. Okay, now the next step is important. You need to check the response body. Okay, if response body not equal to null, means there is some error. Get that error message and map it to the message or append it to the message. So what we are doing here, if response body not equal to null, get the message from the input stream and just map it, okay, to the message. Now all good. You have the message with you, you have the response. From the response, get the status code, and based on each status code, just append this message. Okay, so what you can do, again use the switch case, get the status from the response body. Okay, like this. But we don't want to keep this exception, right? That is the reason we created our generic exception. Map it for all the exception. Now do it for the bad request and for service unavailable. All good, right? Now next step, you need to register this as a bean. So for that, what I can do, I'll create a FeignClient config, annotate @configuration, then define a bean of our custom error decoder. Okay, now once you create this bean, you need to register this configuration class to your Feign client. Okay, so if you see here, there is an option called configuration. Give the configuration class. It's very simple, right? Create a custom error decoder, create a bean of it and register it. And the custom error decoder is nothing doing special here. He is having a method called decode, who will get the response. From the response, we are extracting the error message, and based on the status code, we are setting it. Okay, so this is similar like the REST controller advice, but in REST controller advice, you have lot many options to control the error message. Here, whatever you are getting as part of the response, you can do little bit customization. Okay, let's run it and we'll see whether it is working or not. So it started. Go to the Swagger. I'll give course ID 1 and I'll try to access using Udemy, which is invalid request, right? I should get the error. Yes, I'm getting the error of type 500. Can you see here? But that is what not I'm expecting, right? Since my error decoder, we are already mapping the correct exception message. I'm expecting that message to see here, not the default Spring error message. Now, if you observe here, what this guy does, none of the code, did you find any throw exception use case? No, right? So it means what this error decoder does, it translates the Feign error response like 400, 500, 503 into Java exception. But at the end, you need a advice to handle any type of exception throwing back from your application. Correct? So for that, what you can do, go to the global exception handler, just comment this. I mean, you can define something like this: course service exception and handle it, but let's make it generic. Okay, since you know exception is the parent for all type of exception, I'm just keeping it simple with the exception. At the end, you need this REST controller advice to map the exception coming from error decoder to throw back again to the end user. Okay, that is what needed. So what it does, it just map the error message based on the response. It just map the correct error message. Okay, now let's rerun it. Now go to the browser again, send the request. Are you able to see the message? Bad request from core service. Udemy does not have a course ID, this error. Now if I'll give Coursera, it will work. With Coursera, if I'll give 3, it will give the error. Okay, if I'll give some wrong source system, let's say ABC, I'm getting correct error message. Can you see here? So this is how you can deal with the exception handling while communicating between two microservices or many microservices using Feign Client. You can go for error decoder approach, or you can go for REST controller advice. As per my opinion, I will always go for the REST controller advice, because that is what the generic solution what I believe. Okay, so you just give a try with different use case and let me know in a comment section if you have any doubts.